Call the special governing board meeting of the Jefferson Elementary School District to order at 6:03 p.m. Ms. Covere, will we get roll call, please?
Manufo Leah Inga Anawai,
Here.
Aaron Rashba,
Here.
Shaquille Ali,
Here.
Anthony Sujisaka is absent, Andrea Jordan.
Here. And then, Ms. Makula, can you please lead us in the pledge?
Please rise and pledge. I pledge allegiance
Thank you. I'll be moving on to the approval of the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. Moving on to item 5, persons wishing to address the board. This portion of the agenda is available for individuals to comment on items listed in the special meeting agenda. The maximum time allowed for any speaker is usually 2 minutes. Do we have any speakers? Seeing as we do not, we will close public comment at this time. Now we're going to be moving on to the only item on the agenda, item 6A. The board will discuss placing a parcel tax measure on the March 24 ballot and provide direction to the district administration regarding the measure language. Joy Coomer, partner from Team Civex, will be present to answer any questions.
So I'm going to, in a moment, invite Joy Coomer up to share. She has a kind of introduction slides for us to get us oriented. But just to let you know, what I'm looking for is direction from the board to prepare a resolution for the next board meeting, which will be published tomorrow, to see if you would like the resolution to be for March 2024, the amount of the per parcel, as well as if there's any minor changes to the resolution language that was drafted. So that's what I'm seeking tonight as direction from you so that we can be prepared for the next board meeting, which you will have opportunity to discuss and make changes if necessary. So I'm going to invite Joy Coomer to the podium, and we'll get the slides ready. Oops.
There we go. Good evening, Madam President, board members, Superintendent. Joy Coomer, I'm with Team Civics. Formerly, our firm was known as TBWB. The partners and myself who worked at that firm started a new company with a new name, but we're doing the same work that we've done throughout this area and for the district in the past. So we are still strategy and communication specialists. We've worked with we've helped pass over 400 parcel tax and revenue measures throughout the state of California. We did work on the previous parcel tax, and 2 bonds ago, we helped the district. We work usually with districts on the feasibility of the measure, looking at the best tax rate, timing, developing the materials, and really kind of developing some communications that can be shared with the community as you talk about renewing the parcel tax measure. These are, lots of the districts that we've worked with in San Mateo County. Recently, we just helped South San Francisco with their bond, Millbrae and Sequoia, and I know there's one more, Redwood City. We just worked with all of them in 2022 and 2023. So I think as we start looking at whether or not you want to renew the parcel tax in March and how much and all those considerations, sometimes it's helpful to take a big look at what your registered voter base looks like. So there are 44,316 registered voters. That number fluctuates, right? Just depending as people move in or out. See, I got a typo there. It's about 21,000 households. So we're missing a zero there. 58% of the voters are Democratic voters. They identify or affiliate with the Democratic Party. 11% Republican, and then 31% makes up all of those other voters throughout the district. So that could be the Green Party, that could be decline to state, peace and freedom. There are lots of options there. So it's nice to know when you're looking at renewing a parcel tax. I'll start off. We saw in your survey that you had strong support amongst Democratic voters. So being that they make up a large portion of your voters, that's very helpful for the district. The next pie chart I like to look at is age. You'll notice it's not, which is not uncommon for our state actually, that 27% of your voters are over the age of 65. I think that's always important when we're doing school district work. They tend to be the voters who vote in every single election. So they are your voters. And they also tend to be the voters who are furthest away from schools, right? They may not have someone at school right now. So it's important to keep that in mind as we think about this parcel tax. One of the nice messages about a parcel tax that is helpful with that age group is, of course, the senior exemption. They are eligible for it. Many community seniors decide to pay for it regardless, but just knowing that that's available sometimes can help boost support with that group. As we go younger and we look kind of around the wheel and the voters get younger, you do have a good third of the voters that are, under the age of 34. Or a quarter of the voters, about a third when we add in 35 to 44. They will be harder to turn out in March. And I will say the other thing that I'll just mention is where the smallest amount of support that we saw in the bond, and again, the parcel tax renewal, and again, not uncommon, is that 45 to 54 age group. That's probably young families who are buying homes or raising kids. It's a small part of your district or your voters here. So it's, not significant, but 14%. It's just interesting to kind of keep that in mind. And then the last one is just ethnicity of voters. You have a very diverse community. It always has been very diverse, which is the nice thing about this area and the school district. Just helpful to kind of see how that lays out. And also when we're thinking about communication materials, what different languages and materials that might be important. Turnout in March for this year. This is, looking back at 2020, it's pretty consistent with what we saw then. And when we look at special elections as well, you can see the turnout is much lower, 36 to 38%. When we look at November of 2024, that is your highest turnout. Presidential primaries are always your highest turnout. That's right at about 74 to 76% is what we're thinking will happen. And I mention this only because when you're looking at a March election, right, and the turnout is much lower, it is an opportunity sometimes to really try to engage parents. And even though they might not normally vote in that March election, just knowing how important the parcel tax is, we might be able to bring them in as part of the campaign. And that would be part of our strategy to make sure that they vote and they make sure that they participate in that election because of how important it is. And that honestly was a big strategy before in 2016 too, when the parcel tax was passed then. I put up this timeline just because I think it's helpful when you're looking and thinking about both March and November once again. The first three blue arrows are those items that the district can do throughout a planning process. Just as you did, you can do the voter survey. You can think about election timing. You can think about the tax rate, in this case, the parcel tax rate. You can also consider what different things are going on in different elections, whether it be November or March. The district can also do non-advocacy communications. And all that means is communicating about your need, right? So we can always say that the parcel tax has been in place for 7 years, that it's an important part of the district's funding. We can always talk about those things that it funds. And we can even talk about the things that the district would not be able to do if the parcel tax were not renewed. All of that is non-advocacy communications. What the district cannot do is advocate for or against the ballot measure. We can't ask people to support the ballot measure. We'll work on finalizing the ballot question, just doing some outreach with the superintendent to the community, making sure that everyone knows how important this is to the district, and then putting that final resolution together should the board decide to move forward with March. So the fourth item on the list here you see is a yellow arrow, the Independent Campaign Committee. That is separate. The district cannot run the Independent Campaign Committee. There would need to be an Independent Campaign Committee chair. It doesn't mean that people who work at the district and board members can't participate in their own free time with that campaign, but we cannot use district resources. We cannot use district space. We cannot use district emails. All of it would have to be volunteer hours that were contributed to help make that pass. And that's really when you're thinking about texting, lawn signs, mail, getting out the vote, fundraising for the parcel tax. So all of those things happen after you vote on the resolution. The dates right at the top, I think, are really important. So you do have an upcoming meeting, as was mentioned, where you could vote to put this on the ballot for March of 2024. The district does actually have until December 8th to deliver that resolution. So you have a little bit of extra time. It's nice to have that time just in case there needs to be, if we need to have extra time for consideration. But the resolution does not have to be delivered until December 8th. If you were looking at November, you have until August 9th of 2024. So, a few more months if you were to decide to wait till November. So it's just helpful to see those dates, I think. So the last thing that I put up here was some considerations both for March and for November to think about. Your polling that was presented by Godby Research showed that final polling around a $95 parcel tax renewal was about 66%. You need 2/3, 66.7. I will note that when you went a little bit lower, you went into the $70 range. Support did come back up above 70%. So that would be something, also to consider. So you're very close. But our pros here are you do have a smaller election turnout for that election, as I mentioned earlier. So that is an opportunity for us to really push our supporters to participate in that election. There'll be less on the ballot. So we'll have, an opportunity to be heard. We won't be caught up in the noise of the November presidential election. The con that I mentioned is just that you have a very quick turnaround, and we're going to have to make decisions quickly and move quickly, especially getting that campaign committee up and running. November of 2024, final polling for $95 was at 68%. The pros are, younger voters will show up in that election. We won't have to turn them out. We'll have more diverse voters showing up in that election. The cons are it's going to be busy. It's going to be a noisy election. And of course, the high school district may also be on the ballot at the same time. So I think, those are things that are helpful to think about. I think it's a tough decision, but in looking at your polling, I think if you have a very strong communication effort for the district and you have a strong independent campaign committee that can help, then March still looks like a very promising option. But I would say that you should be thoughtful about the dollar amount because we are so close. And I have seen parcel taxes lose by, 20 votes, and it's always heartbreaking. It's a tough decision because I know the money is very much needed, and you have been stuck at the same amount for a very long time, even though costs have increased. So I know it's a tough decision, but just one piece to think about there. So those were all my slides. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have or go over. I do have Brian's polling here with me. I could look at some more numbers if you had any questions about that.
Thank you, Ms. Coomer. Are there any questions from fellow trustees?
Yeah, I'll kick things off. I have a couple questions, but I just want to thank you for being here and your presentation. I think this is a really important decision that we're making in what we're asking the voters to do and approve. And I just want to make sure we have the most informed decision that we can around the timing, the language, and the amount. So I really appreciate the context that you've given us. The first question I have is if you could just talk about your role in when you worked with our district last time in previous parcel tax measures, what the climate was like then and how that you've seen it has changed since then in the other school districts that you've worked with.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very interesting because one of the things that we've been able to do more recently is we've been able that I wouldn't have thought we could do back in 2016 is so for example, Belmont Redwood Shores, we renewed their parcel tax with a COLA. So every year it will increase by 3%. That is a change that we've seen that we previously voters just, weren't interested in that. I think people understand that schools and districts have a need for funding. And your survey said that people agree with that as well. And the more they agree that you have a need for funding, the more willing they are to support you. The parcel taxes are always hard, though. It's always 66.7%. And it always feels like you're holding your breath till the last minute to get those results in. And where we have very strong campaigns who can go out and talk to voters and, just get the facts in people's hands, I find that people are willing to be a good partner and they want to support the district, right? They've seen the good work that has been done with the existing parcel tax. The struggles that I have seen with parcel tax is when there is no term of years, when instead of it expiring, districts have tried to go, in perpetuity. That has not been as successful. Voters still want to know that at some point it could expire, or at least they'll be asked again if they want to renew it. So those are two big changes that I think I've seen over the years. When we looked back in 2016 at the parcel tax, and even the bond before it, one of the biggest challenges was voter participation. Parents were it was very hard to get parents out to vote. I think, back then we even ran voter registration drives, and I think it's improved over the years. I mean, certainly we see higher voter turnout now than we saw back then. We'll still have to do work with families. We'll still need to do the work to make sure people know this is important, it's renewal. And we need their help making sure this passes.
So you did not mention the pandemic in the changes that have occurred. Let me ask you specifically about that. Like if you have seen a sea change in the popularity or campaigns for parcel tax ballot measures since that happened, or no?
The districts that have been able to pass parcel taxes still can pass parcel taxes. The districts who have not been successful have still been unsuccessful. So I don't know that the pandemic made a great change in voter voter sentiments about parcel taxes. The more democratic leaning a community is, it just tends to have an easier time getting support for parcel taxes. One thing I will say is that I think sometimes districts are thoughtful about the fact that there were funds that were received during the pandemic for schools, and they're worried that people will think, why can't you use these funds to do the things that you're talking about doing? And honestly, I just haven't seen that be a big factor. Like, people seem to understand that funding was used to do these other things and, help with learning loss, help with technology, help with filters, right? There hasn't been this huge disconnect where people think you got a windfall of money and you don't need a parcel tax. Now, I just haven't seen that play out.
Are there any further questions?
I've got a few more questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
So can you just talk a little bit more about the work you did with our district specifically in the past, and what your observations were about our district? What were the unique things that made it successful, the campaign that we led, or unique challenges that we faced?
Well, again, voter participation was the biggest challenge that we faced in this particular district, which is why we almost never, in fact, there are maybe only 3 districts where I can think we did voter registration drives to make sure that parents were registered and encouraging them to vote and participate. That was very specific to this district. And it was very important to getting a parcel tax passed, because a previously one, we had not worked on it, but a previous one had failed before we came on board. And so really doing that work of engaging parents and making sure they voted was the difference between, success and failure. We did have a good campaign that did, back then we still did phone banking. We don't do phone banking anymore. People just don't answer their phones. Sometimes we do phone banking with seniors, right? Because they still have landlines and still answer phones. And we have a good message about the exemption. So sometimes we do a couple nights of phone banks to voters who are over 65 who would be eligible for the exemption. But a lot of the work has changed since then. A lot of it we find, direct mail is still a good way to communicate with voters when we want them to, pay attention, go vote. Texting, and honestly, calls, robocalls, not physical calls, but just someone reminding you, hey, election day is tomorrow. This election is critical to our success. And then I would say the work that we did with the district early on, building some of those communication materials and making sure that they were distributed to families. And now we have way more tools, right? All of the districts, including yours, have social media accounts that we can use to send information out. Again, information, not advocacy. We have, regular communications by the superintendent, by principals, which actually are very close, much closer to the families. So making sure that they are sending information out about how important this is to pass, and or how important it is to the district not to pass, to be clear. So, that is something that the district, should you go in March, could even do, next January. Send information out about the board's decision to put this on the ballot and how it helps the district provide services to students. So those, hopefully those are specific things that are helpful.
You've answered this partially, but what in your experience is most important that board of directors do and the leadership of the school district do to make the campaign successful?
Honestly, there are many pieces to it. There is always, if you're going to have lawn signs and you're going to do mail and you're going to do texting, there is fundraising. And fundraising is hard for parcel taxes, right? If I'm just being frank. Some of your vendors will donate to help renew the parcel tax, but a lot of times it is community members coming together. It is PTAs donating to the campaign. That is the hardest piece, is raising the money to be able to do some of the things that you need to do to have a successful campaign. The rest of it, I think, having people involved, having people who care, even if we have, like a couple leaders from each school site so that they can be helpful in getting the word out to each of their school sites and be helpful in encouraging. So, right, the district can't be present at pick up and drop off, but the campaign can. And you can imagine, right up on those final days as people haven't voted and we know we need to get families out to vote, having a presence at each school site and just really reminding parents to go vote like that, those kinds of activities can be really meaningful and helpful. So I think those are the things that are critical to success, and those are the things that make a difference. Some districts have had great success with their PTAs and their foundations really donating to help with the parcel tax. Not everybody has that kind of funds. And so we just have to be really creative about that part.
Are there any further questions?
I don't have any, excuse me. I don't have any questions, but just a few comments, if that's all right. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge that, securing funds in this way for our district is important. And, I'm glad we're taking it seriously and that you're asking a lot of questions. There are some potential cons, so I kind of jotted down a few. Some people might bring up the fact that there could be, the additional financial burden on property owners, especially seniors with fixed income. People might bring up the fact that there's no guarantee of unanimous support. As we said, we're kind of at the border of it with the polling. And then, there's still issues with the education system and fiscal inefficiencies of our state. And we have to make sure that we're, properly managing our budget and those types of things. So a parcel tax might not solve those problems permanently. And that all being said, I think it's a good opportunity for our district to keep those programs that we have put in place that we value so much and that impact our students' success. Also gives us an opportunity to get the community involved, as was stated, that we can't actually do all these things, but we can get our supporters to do it for us. And that we just want to make sure that our students have all the tools and access to everything that they need to thrive and flourish and compete in the 21st century. So initially when Superintendent McCulloch brought this to our attention, I remember saying I wasn't in favor of any new taxes, but I was willing to go through this process and see what the community was saying and see what you all thought. So I definitely support it at this time.
Are there any further comments, questions?
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I want to say that my thoughts are aligned with yours, Trustee Ali. I will go back to the evening where we were tasked to look at that $1 million and decide what are we going to cut. And it's all of the language that's in this draft of the programs that we had to decide. And for me, while we look at this opportunity of why it is important, we're also looking at, in my mind, a level of a cost analysis, not monetarily. That's not how I always see this. I think it's important when we raise awareness of why this should happen, even as a property owner or someone that contributes in different ways to our community. I think it is how we drive it home. And to me, when I look at assessing the importance and what the cost will be, I think that it is our job when we enlist support to remind our community the cost it will have if we don't try to figure out measures like this to assist our efforts to have a quality public education in our community. So I'm supportive of it. I mean, any good thing comes at a cost. I think this is a cost that we can bear. And I appreciate the opportunity for you to come. For me, this, like I had mentioned when we decided to have this meeting, this was a refresher for me to be reminded of the importance and also the process, because it allows me to voluntarily, outside of our roles, to be out and be able to articulate the message better. So I appreciate this opportunity to hear some language that I can, put back into my vocabulary to be able to communicate the cause. So thank you.
I also echo my fellow board trustee sentiments. I have concerns about the cost, and I'm speaking of the cost that that our community is going to look at when then they're being told to vote. I'm also in the younger generation, but I do vote every single election. My concern is putting it out during a time frame where our younger voters are not going to be voting, and that turnout, and then thinking through, well, if it does not pass, then what happens? I'm so far ahead of it, but I'm really kind of concerned that okay, it's going to be a struggle to fundraise, where it's going to be a struggle to get turnout because the age range that's probably going to vote during the time frame. If it doesn't pass, then what? Does this now affect these programs? The answer is yes. And then how do we relay that to our community? So how do we get ahead of that so that they understand? But then I'm also concerned because I think there's this thin line between the independent campaign and, let's say, me being on a campus, because I am technically an employee of the district, and then me being on a campus trying to promote this. Where is the line between what I can and cannot do being on that independent campaign? So there's a bunch of things swirling in my head right now. I'm just kind of, laying it all out there, and I don't know. None of that was a question. It was just more of like.
I can answer part of that, and I'm going to ask you to
Okay.
answer some of it.
Yeah.
I know it wasn't a question, but
Yeah,
I'm going
but
to answer
you
it.
get what I'm saying. Yes.
If part of it is what she was saying about communicating ahead of time of why we need to renew this, and making sure, and not saying vote for it, but saying this is, we have a measure and this is what it will fund if this, this is what will happen if this measure does not pass, correct? We can say
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So being very clear, and we were saying in January, and mainly in January, early February, we do this kind of mass communication, after all the holidays when people are really paying attention to what's happening. So we actually, I see it as a, a kind of a short time to really get the information out and over communicating so that it's well known why we're doing this. The other piece about you and your role, I'm going to turn over to, before that, if it doesn't pass, which we hope it will, but if it doesn't pass, that we still actually have the November election, that we could try again and continue to campaign and get the word out. And it's a presidential election. The high school district, will, most likely will be on the ballot. Maybe we join forces somehow to help celebrate both our districts in that way. But that is another option. Hopefully we wouldn't have to deal with that. But are you able to answer her question about what she can and cannot do?
Yes, I can. And I hope you don't mind if I segue slightly, but my job often is to give advice to districts and say, I see a path and here's, what I see. Your final ballot test for March, as we know, was 66%. That was renewing at $95. When the alternative was asked at $78, support in March went up to 71.5. That's a significant jump, not only in support for the measure, it still gives you a small increase to what you have, but the intensity of the support went up significantly. So it's possible that $90 feels too high to the community, but 78 feels more reasonable. And so I put that out there. Again, I know the need is great, and I know how hard it is to make these decisions, but that is a difference that seems helpful to us, right? Then to go back to your question about what you can and can't do. Sometimes I like to think about it as what hat are you wearing, right? Are you wearing your hat as a board member, or are you wearing your hat as a parent, or are you wearing a hat as a volunteer? And so as a board member, you can always, again, provide facts. You can say, we had to renew this funding. Here are the programs it funds. If we do not renew this funding, we will have to consider reducing these programs or these positions, right? I know part of it is with literacy support staff. So like maybe those are things that you would need to consider as a board. You can always say that. Those are truths. Those are the honest truths that the district would be looking at. If you are later, though, with the independent campaign committee and you are on the public sidewalk, and for example, you want to hand out flyers that say vote yes on, whatever the measure letter is. If it's your personal time, we all get our personal time still. District staff all get their personal time still, as long as they are not on the clock. And I know sometimes that, people are always going to recognize you as board members. And so sometimes that, you're like, am I crossing the line? But people understand when you are speaking for yourself. And I think I always say to people, because I sometimes get asked by board members, well, what if I go to the Rotary and I want to talk to the Rotary, or I want to talk to my group? How can I do that? And I say, stand up and say, I'm not speaking here today as a board member. I'm speaking here today as a parent, a community member, someone who cares about our schools. And then you have made it clear that you are giving your opinion as a person and as a volunteer. So you can wear many hats. You can participate in an independent campaign committee. You just have to think about what hat you're wearing.
Thank you. Are there any? Yeah, go ahead.
I had a question and then a comment. I remember at our last meeting, was it the other consultant said that there wasn't much difference between when we polled for $78 and $71. Am I remembering that correctly?
You mean by percentage? It was, I think, 68, which would be renewing at the current status, and then 78.
Yes, that's correct. That was the difference. A straight renewal, so renewing without increase at all, was very statistically, it was the same as renewing at $78. So you could add $10 to the parcel tax, and they both pulled above 70% at statistically about the same rate.
And then my comment is, I prefer, if we're gonna give messages about this to the public, that we would use the positive language that's in the bond. And I think we're gonna work on that tonight and finish that, because, excuse me, I don't want to operate or put our public in the space of operating out of fear. So I remember jotting down that night too, that the things we were going to talk about: retaining teachers, helping students with reading, and protecting the core math, science, technology, reading and writing, academics, saying Sacramento can't take away the money, recruiting teachers, not just retaining, and then just reminding them that California is at the bottom of the states when it comes to funding, and that we're trying to keep students out of trouble and off drugs. So, I mean, I know you said we can talk about what might happen if we don't, but I prefer to do it more proactively.
That is the way we develop the messaging. I'm just letting you know the parameters.
Okay.
So we develop messaging in the positive. I agree with you that negative doesn't tend to motivate people, but it is a allowable communication by the district.
I had a couple comments. First of all, I just want to underscore how important I think that this measure is. And really, I just think about it from an equity perspective across our county, that, our students get many thousands of dollars less in funding per students than districts to our south. And I want to see our students have the same opportunities that any other public school student in San Mateo County would have. So I think that this renewing this tax is really important. This measure is really important to keeping our funding equivalent in our district. Just thinking about the timing, the amount, and the language. So the timing, I definitely share the concerns that President Jordan brought up of having a lower turnout. I think that that is an overall con, that less, young voters would turn out. But I do think that the fewer distractions outweighs that, the fewer distractions in March and getting a chance to come before the voters early and first, with our measure. I do think that that makes a lot of sense. I just on the amount, and then I definitely have questions about the language, but the amount, the point I just want to make is that, $68 was approved in 2016, and we have had significant inflation since then. So I believe that renewing at $68 now would actually be a decrease in our funding. And, I do think that we should consider, if we go for a lower amount, make sure to consider the lower funding that would come to our district. And I just did the math. If I'm correct, I think it would be $300,000 less to our district, 1.4 million per year versus 1.7 million if we went with the $78 measure. So that's just something to consider, and we really need the funding. And then finally, on the language, I'm just really curious to hear, Joy, your recommendation. You've given us some insights on the timing, on the amount, but I'm curious what you thought of the language of the proposal as it is written.
It off. There we go. Sorry. So as we were looking at it, we did look at, the hierarchy of priorities and where your values were and where the community values were. So, right, the top three were exactly as we heard: attracting and retaining quality teachers, helping students read at grade level, and retaining and maintaining those literacy specialists, and STEM, right, supporting STEM programs. So science, reading, writing, math, technology. So those are the main ones. I think the one that also was listed in the ballot language was providing after-school homework programs. In the ballot language, that didn't necessarily test as well as some other things. And if it's not something that you are spending the money on or would spend the money on, I think there are other things that you could consider.
Okay, so I think that, and I don't know how much of this is going to happen in those other meetings, but it would be good for us to have these, just a few bullet points that we could focus on, and each of us could maybe master one of them and have like an elevator speech or something. I think that would be helpful.
And I believe we can get you that through coordination with Ms. Coomer here.
Yep.
And also, as we're talking about the amount, I have some figures here that might help conceptualize it. So $95 per parcel is $1,770,040. If we went down to $88, which we didn't see in the survey, but that would be 1.64 million. And 88 is maybe a little, when people see 95, they might round up to 100, but 88, and that's pretty high amount there. 78 is 1.45, as you said. 75 is almost 1.4, and then 68 is 1.2, which, as you said, is with inflation is actually receiving less than when we initially passed the parcel tax. So to just give you some context on amounts. So if you have more discussion, but like I said, I need to hear from you a direction for March or November, which I'm hearing March is the consensus. The amount, and this is the draft that we shared with you. The abbreviated ballot, there is a word limit. And so we have to be really careful with this one. This was crafted by our legal counsel as well. And then the other side is the full ballot measure or full ballot text. And that is based on what was shared in the feasibility study. So we would obviously change the parcel tax amount if it wasn't going to be 95. And then if there's anything on here that you feel needs to be changed. So those are the things I need to hear from you tonight.
Is there a reason why the ballot text ends in a question mark?
Yes, it's required to by law. So some interesting notes that might be helpful as you're looking at the ballot question, because I can see it as well. It must be 75 words or less.
Okay.
It has to identify in the very beginning the very specific programs or things that you will be spending the money on. We can't pontificate about, successful students or academic excellence. We have to get right to the point. And then you'll see, shall Jefferson Elementary School District's measure be adopted, replacing the expiring measure with a $95 parcel tax? I might actually recommend slightly different language to the attorney, but all of that, raising 1.7 annually for 9 years is legally required. So that exact wording all has to be there. We have to say how much it raises. And then the final thing is it has to end in a question mark.
I guess I'm just still confused about the question mark because I don't see a question. Is there?
It's saying shall the district
Got it.
be adopted.
There we go.
That measure be adopted.
Yeah.
It's just a really long sentence. So it gets lost a little bit.
May I ask another question? President Jordan?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So, first of all, I agree with Trustee Rashba. I think I said at the last meeting as well that I was in support of the $95 figure, but I do have a question about, it caught my ear as well, the replacing the 68 with 95. So I'm curious about the language that you would suggest, but also, do you have any data of, how that affects the voters when they're replacing a parcel tax with a higher figure?
There have been a lot of changes recently in the law regarding parcel taxes and bonds both. And so it's possible that this is reflective of that. I haven't had an opportunity to visit with them about that, but typically we would say renewing the expiring measure with a $95 parcel tax. So I just, that replacing sort of caught me by surprise, but I would just visit with them to make sure that we can't say renewing instead of replacing. I think renewing helps people remember that it's something that they're already doing, whereas replacing just has a different connotation to it. So that's my concern there. And yeah.
Do you know just even anecdotal data about how the voters respond when they have that renewal?
So usually I would say if it were a straight renewal, those tend to be supported very well. Rarely does a straight renewal fail. The only times that I have seen a straight renewal fail is when there is something wrong in the district, right? Parents are upset about something not going right in the district. And so they are making a point of not voting and not supporting the district in a parcel tax renewal. When you are looking at increasing the tax, again, it's a tricky place. I do think voters understand that there is a need, but they also realize that this will mean they will pay more money. And when we consider that in a March election, most of those voters will be your older voters, some of them may be eligible for the exemption. So that's the other thing to consider is when it goes up, more people may choose to file for exemption. So the amount that it raises annually could very well change. I have seen that happen very often in districts when they raise their parcel tax. So I think, it was mentioned if March, if you were to fail in March, you could come back in November. And so some districts have taken the tactic of, since they have a backup, like, let's go for what we really need. And if we can't get there, though I will say, getting to 66.4 is not 66.7, and that really hurts. But you can choose in November to lower it. And I would imagine, supporters would come back to you then, because you could say, okay, we tried, we told you what our needs were, but we hear you just can't afford that right now. So, right, you do have that opportunity to have that dialogue and come back in November and make that change.
All right, thank you. That was one of the main reasons why I was thinking about just going for the higher amount as well. And then we have the opportunity to lower it in November. But I don't even want to think negatively. We're going to do this. The community is going to get behind it and accomplish this for us.
Any further questions? If not, we can discuss how we would like to move forward, unless you had a question.
I'd comment on the language. Comments on the language, and I'll just say the amount as well. I certainly concur with Trustee Ali that we need to be thinking positively and, seeing this forward because, I do think that really with the with inflation, this is not a huge increase. I don't think that voters necessarily think that way, since the ballot language does not mention the current amount. I think they would see it as a new figure. The other thing I looked at, just a few of the area parcel taxes and noted that 2022, the Bayshore District passed a $96 parcel tax, and that is primarily Daly City. So, I think very comparable demographics, voters to ours. I also just wanted to comment on the language. I noted, like you did, the after-school programs not ranking as high. And I was also wondering why that was there. I also don't see mention of the word STEM or STEAM, and I think it might be wise to put that in. The other comment I have is that the exempting seniors is lost a little bit in the current language, and I'm wondering if there is a way to call that out. I don't suppose it's possible to underline certain text but there may be a way of writing it to call more attention to that, since it may be important.
There is ways to, providing exemptions for senior homeowners, right? Like we can add a few more words if we take a few somewhere else. So there are always those options. Even instead of provide after school homework programs, mentioning technology did well. I will say most voters don't know STEM. So when we say protecting core academics in reading, writing, math, science, and technology, like we've tested many times, even throughout the Bay Area, STEM, and you would think everybody would know what that is, but it's still just not a common vernacular phrase that people think of.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I depending on the age of the voters, that probably is gonna be a sticking point. And if in March we're getting 65 plus, I think we would lose them there. But I do agree with maybe figuring out how to maybe add language, because right now it just says exempt seniors. I don't think that would be enough, because what does an exempt senior mean? I mean, I don't know what that means So, however, even though I understand that we need the money, I think 95 is pretty high. And I only say that because I follow the economy. And there's a lot of things happening going into 2024. And my concern is that I don't want to go to do this again in November. And I'm more inclined to say 91, 88 to 91 than I am 95.
Back to one of your comments, since after school homework programs is something that maybe we could remove, that's 4-5 words that we can capture back to add something more in the exempting seniors section.
I guess I would just need to know what we would like to say to make exempting seniors a little bit more prominent. What would be a suggestive verbiage for that?
I'm going to lean on Joy here.
So with exemptions for senior homeowners, that would fit.
Yeah. I think adding the word homeowners probably is helpful. Does anyone disagree with that? And then I guess going back to the dollars, I know, Trustee Ali and Trustee Rashba like the $95 number, but again, seeing the favorability, the age of the voters, and taking the economy into account, what do you think about lowering it slightly?
Yeah, if we lower it, I was thinking about 88. I think that was what I was mistakenly when I said the difference between 78 and 71 wasn't that much. I think it was 88 and 81. That the voters would support either one of those amounts similarly. So I would be willing to go down to 88.
Yeah, it seems like that would be a safer course. And I do certainly agree that we would want to avoid doing this twice. We would want passage. But I guess I would just challenge the board to think of what the effect of the less funding. And I believe it would be about 130,000 less if we went from 95 to 88. So, there would be a negative effect there. And I guess it's just thinking about that versus having a really close election.
I just did the calculations. It would be 130,000 less going from 95 to 88. If the likelihood of, passing at 88 for 130,000, it's still more than what we're already taking. It's from 1.2 to 1.6. It's over 400,000 more than what we're currently receiving on the parcel tax. So when we, it's not really a deficit because it is actually more than what we're currently receiving.
If I may, I do think there is a psychology for being below $90. 88, is reasonable. And again, when I don't see that you tested 88, I see 78, 68, and 95. But the jump in definitely yes from 95, even coming down. It's over a 10-point jump. So
It is.
I do feel like there is some community hesitation. Again, I think they're with you and they want to support you, but I think people are thinking a little bit about their pocketbooks. So 88 might be a very good compromise there. And again, recognizing that this is a very tough choice for you all, so I don't miss that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I will say that 88 is sitting with me much better. And even though we don't see a deficit, I still recognize that we would still be impacted by not meeting our overall goal when we looked at this number initially, but I'm actually much more comfortable. It's more digestible, I think, at 88 versus 95. I'm comfortable with 88.
So what I'm hearing, what I think I'm hearing, and obviously we're still in the discussion phase here, is that we agree to a March timeframe. We are going to remove the after-school homework program language from this ballot text. We're going to add the word homeowners to the exempting seniors text. And we are 90% 88, still probably leaning towards 95, but 88 is, at least in my eyes, going to give us a higher possibility of winning in March and hopefully not going out again from a voter turnout and response standpoint. So.
Thank you for the direction. I just want to
Yes.
confirm with the board too, but we'll work with our legal counsel because they're the ones that know what you can. And I think also looking at the word replacing and change to renewing if it's allowable. So I heard what you said. I've taken notes. And so we'll have a resolution prepared for the November 1st. Today's November 1st, November 8th agenda for March 2024 election, $88 a parcel, and making those language changes. Is that, do I have a consensus? I don't know if we need a motion, probably not, because it's really just
It's a
providing
discussion
direction.
item.
Yeah.
No.
So consensus?
One small additional language change. The second word is small, but I think important. Just strikes me as funny to maintain / enhance quality elementary and middle school education. I would advocate removing maintain. We are looking. This will enhance our educational offerings.
I would recommend you keep it in. I'm sorry to disagree. It's ultimately your choice, but sometimes voters value maintaining things even more than enhancing, because enhancing. So I think the combo together is actually very beneficial for you, because they want to help you, maintain a good education. Sometimes they see enhancing as, now I have to pay more and it's going to be more expensive and it's going to, right? Like there is a careful balance there with that language.
Well, this is where I'm really glad that you are here, Joy, and thank you for that insight. I would not agree with that at a gut level, but I trust your experience in working with this, and what you said does make sense to me.
And I guess it's interesting that you say that, because I think of that as also demographic and our age thing, depending on who you talk to sometimes, and not even from a cost standpoint. Sometimes people think, well, it's not broken. Why are you trying to change something that I think is great? And it's just a matter of opinion. So leaving both words in there allows to give everyone the ability to buy into it versus, well, it's a me versus you kind of thing. Okay, I see.
Okay, so I feel that I have been provided with enough direction to prepare helps prepare the resolution for the November 8th agenda.
Can we, question, or one last question, or maybe adjustment. Attract/retain. Can we say retain/attract? Because it's the same thing. It's like maintaining and retaining are the same, and enhancing and attracting are the same. Can we switch retain to where attract is?
I want to ask
or
the opinion.
is that a problem?
No, I mean, it doesn't, I think you most often hear it as
Attract and
attracting and retaining.
Yeah.
And And I think that's probably because the statewide teachers use that language a lot. So it's probably not bad to say retain and attract. It's just probably different than what people hear most often. Does that make sense?
Just keeping it status quo is what I'm hearing.
I mean, it will be something that people will have heard before. And sometimes when we switch words around, it just sounds enough different that it's like, why is this different? So,
Okay, that's helpful. That's fine. We can keep it as is.
Can I just make a comment? So I just remember one of our board meetings last year when it was stated that this board does not make decisions or like to make decisions. And we've done a 180 on that. You know, we're making decisions and we're getting into the nitty gritty of it. So I appreciate our new direction.
Thank you. Superintendent Mikulik, sorry, I think I cut you off when you were going to finalize what we were going to do for, because you're basically going to publish an agenda tomorrow and you need to have the language correct. So
The resolution we can attach later. We just need
Okay.
the agenda title. Is that
Okay.
correct? Yeah. So we have a day or two
Okay.
to make sure that we want to make sure it's right. And so then, it's on the agenda we just needed the amount on the agenda item. So March 2024, as well as the $88 per parcel. So once we have that, then the resolution, we can have our legal counsel support us with that in time for it to be attached.
perfect.
So
Thank
I
you.
have enough direction, and I appreciate you all coming in on a special meeting.
Awesome. And with that,
Before we do, I think we have a.
oh, yes,
I mean, you don't actually have it on there.
no worries. We have a public comment from AFT President, Mr. Paul Hagan.
Make sure your microphone is on. Is it green?
This is, okay,
Now it is.
all right. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and the Warriors game is about to start, so I'm going to go quick, quicker than you guys. But no, this is important, and I want to thank you for taking the time and having a good discussion on this and bringing up some good questions on this. It is really, really important. And I know we don't want to focus on the negative, but I kept thinking, if we don't get this, we will be looking at cuts. And if we have to look at cuts, we're looking at losing teachers. And that's against my principles. So thank you. And also, I did look up the number 88 in numerology. My last advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Are there any other comments? If not, we will be adjourning this meeting at 7:11.